The Princess in Chains asterisk. The war had ended just 5 days ago. But the galaxy still felt broken. Ships drifted through space like ghosts. Their hulls scarred, their lights dim. Captain Elias and his crew were searching for survivors in the ruined sector near the Varnix line. That's when they picked up the faint distress signal. It was old, weak, and hidden in static. But one thing was clear, it was not human. They tracked the source to a small alien shuttle floating silently in the wreckage. It looked half-burned, torn open by some explosion. No life signs showed on the scanners at first. But something told Elias not to ignore it. He sent in a team. And among the twisted metal and wires they found her. She was curled in the corner. Her skin pale blue with silver markings across her arms. Her hair was long and dark, wrapped around her like a curtain, and her wrists. They were chained to the wall of the shuttle. The chains were made of a material the humans didn't recognize. But they were strong. Too strong for any prisoner. Especially one who looked barely older than 20 in human years. They brought her aboard, careful not to hurt her. She didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't struggle. She just stared at them with golden eyes that looked like they held storms. Inside, Lieutenant Aaron tried giving her food, warm blankets, soft clothes, but she refused everything. Except when Corporal Mason entered the medbay. He was just supposed to be guarding the door. But when she saw him, her head tilted slightly, like something inside her clicked. He didn't say much, just nodded at her and sat in the corner silently. After a few minutes, she reached out and took the food he placed near her. It was the first time she moved willingly. The crew didn't notice at first. They were too busy scanning her DNA, searching the database for her species. But Mason noticed every time he walked in. She would sit up straighter, her eyes following him across the room. She even smiled once. A strange, quiet smile. Dr. Hensley called it imprinting. She's been through a trauma, he said, looking over the readings. Maybe she sees him as a safe presence. A protector figure, but there was more to it. She didn't act weak around him. She acted calm, focused, even powerful. When others approached her, she hissed or turned her face away. She didn't trust them, not even the captain, but Mason. He was different in her eyes. She tried to speak to him once. Her voice soft, the words strange. But then she stopped, frustrated, and turned her back to the others. The chain around her wrists was removed on day 2, still. She never left the medbay unless Mason was walking with her. The moment he stepped away, she froze or returned to a corner. It was like she didn't care about freedom, food, or safety. Only his presence. On day 3, she finally spoke a full sentence. "I see you," she whispered to Mason while they sat alone. The words were in perfect English, her accent sharp but clear. He looked at her, unsure what to say. "You do?" he asked quietly. She nodded, and for the first time, she reached out and touched his hand. The entire crew was watching from the medbay cameras. Everyone was silent, even the captain. "This isn't normal," Dr. Hensley said slowly. "She's not acting like a lost prisoner or even a scared refugee. She's acting like she's found something she needs." Mason didn't understand what she wanted from him. He just knew she relaxed when he was near. He started bringing her small things, books, drawings, pieces of metal to play with. She accepted everything, always watching him like he was the only real thing in her world. Then on day 5 she stopped eating again, until Mason came in and handed her the food himself. She took it, but instead of eating, she leaned closer and whispered something in her language. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. And though he couldn't understand the words, the tone made his skin crawl. Captain Elias called an emergency meeting. "This isn't just trauma," he said, his voice low. "She's not recovering, she's adapting." To him, and no one, not even Mason, knew what that meant yet. But one thing was clear, this girl, this alien princess wasn't just another survivor. She had another need, one deeper than food or shelter. And Mason, unknowingly, had just become the center of it. The ship's engines hummed gently through the silence. But in the medbay, it was far from quiet. Alarms weren't blaring, no one was yelling. Yet every crew member felt the tension. The alien girl, the one they rescued from the wreck, had stopped eating again, not because she was sick, not because she was weak, but because Mason wasn't there. She sat on the bed like a statue, golden eyes fixed on the door. 2 trays of untouched food rested beside her, steam long faded. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge anyone else. Only when the door hissed open and Mason stepped in did she react. Her head turned instantly, her posture changed. She stood up slowly, walked toward him, and stopped just 1 step away. He didn't speak right away. He just placed the food in her hands, and this time she ate, carefully, slowly, watching him. It was like the food meant nothing unless he gave it to her. Dr. Hensley watched from behind the glass, arms crossed tight. "This isn't nutrition," he said under his breath. "It's attachment. She's not hungry for food." Captain Elias replied. "She's hungry for him." No one argued. Mason didn't understand it either. He was just a corporal, not a diplomat or a scientist. All he knew was that when she looked at him, it wasn't fear or confusion in her eyes. It was something else, something raw, something unspoken, something that made him feel like he mattered more than he ever had before. She began to speak more, 1 word at a time. "Stay," she whispered when he tried to leave. "Eat," she offered, placing a piece of her meal near his mouth. Mason chuckled awkwardly, but played along. When he took the bite, her eyes lit up like stars. Her name was finally discovered on the 6th day, not from her lips, but from the pattern of symbols found on her broken shuttle. Rayla, the translation read, first daughter of the Kavar. Dominion, a princess, not just by title, but by blood. One of the most feared empires before the war collapsed. The crew held a secret meeting. "If she's Kavar, why isn't she trying to kill us?" Aaron asked. "Because she's bonded," Hensley answered. "Some alien species don't bond like humans. They bond deeper, instinctively. Maybe she thinks Mason is her match." "Match?" Mason repeated when he was finally told. "She doesn't even know me. She knows enough," Hensley replied. "Or maybe that's just how her kind works." Rayla began to act differently around the rest of the crew. She didn't attack, but her presence grew stronger, more confident. She started learning fast, human language, tools, gestures, even jokes, but everything she learned she directed toward Mason. One evening, Mason found her outside the med bay. Waiting, he raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You're not supposed to leave without clearance," he said. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and touched his chest over his heart. "I need," she said quietly. "You," he took a step back unsure. "Need me for what?" But she didn't answer that. She just smiled, not the empty kind, but something heavy and ancient, like she understood more than she was letting on. That night, the ship's AI caught something strange. Ryla's vitals were rising when Mason entered her room. Temperature, heart rate, even brain activity. When he left, her systems dropped like she was powering down. Hensley showed the logs to Elias, and the captain frowned. "She's not just watching him," he said. "She's syncing with him." Meanwhile, Mason tried to act normal, but it was getting harder every time she looked at him. He felt something pull at his chest. Not fear, not duty, something warmer. She wasn't a monster or a spoiled brat like they thought on day 1. She was intelligent, capable, and strange in a beautiful way. On day 7, she made her first full sentence. "I was fed before," she said to Mason, sitting close beside him, but not full. He looked at her confused. "You mean, we didn't give you enough food?" She shook her head slowly, her golden eyes glowing softly. "You gave me what I needed," she said, touching his hand again. "Now I want what I want." Mason's breath caught for a second, because in her voice, in her gaze, in the way her fingers gently locked with his, he understood what she meant. This wasn't about hunger anymore. This was about desire, about choice, about something far deeper than either of them had expected. And in that moment, the line between rescuer and royalty began to disappear. The stars outside the ship blinked slowly in the void. Inside, the mood had shifted. Rayla was no longer seen as just a rescued alien. She was now a puzzle, a presence, and a rising tension no one could ignore. Her golden eyes followed Mason wherever he went. She didn't speak much, but her actions spoke louder than any words. She began touching her wrist often, the place where chains had once been. Not out of pain, but as if she was remembering something important. Captain Elias decided it was time to act. He summoned Rayla to the ship's common room, not to question her, but to test something. He brought in a translator drone with advanced alien language processors. Rayla didn't look surprised when the drone hovered near her. She spoke clearly and confidently. "You think I am broken," she said, "but I am awakened." Elias leaned forward. "Then speak to us," he said. "Tell us why you're here." She looked at Mason first, then back to Elias. "I was being transported," she said, "not by enemies, but by my own blood. They feared my hunger." Silence fell across the room. "Your hunger?" Hensley asked. Rayla nodded slowly. "My kind feed differently," she said, "not with mouths alone, but with connection. Not food, not water, but presence, bonding, attention." She turned toward Mason. "He woke it in me," Mason looked around the room, suddenly feeling exposed. "I didn't mean to," he said quietly. Rayla stepped closer. "You didn't need to," she replied. "It was already there," she told them her species. The Kavar were emotional symbiotes. They grew strong not by what they ate, but by who they bonded with. Royalty among the Kavar were forbidden from choosing outsiders. They were raised in silence, trained to suppress attachment. But Rayla, she had never been good at silence. She had been chained not as punishment, but as control. Her family saw her need as weakness. They tried to break it, isolate her, lock her away until the hunger passed. But it never did. "When I saw him," she said, looking at Mason again, "my mind settled, my body listened, my hunger calmed." "You call it imprinting," she added. "We call it calling. He is my call." No one knew what to say. Was this magic or science beyond their understanding? Was it love or something deeper, biological, unshakable? And more importantly, was Mason safe? The answer came quickly. Later that day, a hostile raider ship attacked without warning. The human crew scrambled to defense, but they were outgunned. Just as the ship trembled from impact, Rayla stepped forward. Her eyes glowing like fire, she spoke a single word in her native tongue, and her skin shimmered with power. Before anyone could stop her, she stormed into the lower bay where the attackers boarded. Mason ran after her, shouting her name. He expected to find her cornered, helpless, but what he saw stunned him. She stood in the middle of the bay, hands glowing with energy. The raiders froze, not out of fear, but confusion. One of them dropped his weapon and knelt, whispering something in the Kavar language. She wasn't just a princess. She was something more, a royal weapon, a soulbinder. The crew watched through cameras as she forced the raiders back with only her voice. They didn't shoot her. They obeyed her. When Mason reached her, she turned slowly and touched his chest again. "I have shown you," she whispered. "Now you must decide." "Decide what?" he asked, breathless. "If you will keep me close, or let me fade." Captain Elias reviewed the security footage with the rest of the team. "She controlled them," he said, without firing a shot. "And she only did it when Mason was in danger," Hensley added. "She doesn't want war." Aaron said, "She wants him." Mason sat alone in the observation deck that night, staring out at the stars. Rayla stood beside him silently, not speaking, just watching him. He finally asked, "What happens if I say no?" She blinked slowly. "Then the bond will starve," she said, "and I will sleep again. Forever." It wasn't a threat, it was truth. She didn't want control, didn't want power. She wanted presence, connection. The one thing she'd been denied all her life. And Mason, for reasons he didn't fully understand, didn't want her to fade. The ship's hallways were silent when the decision was made. It came not from fear, but from protocol. Captain Elias had seen too much, heard too much. Rayla was no longer just a survivor. She was a royal alien bonded to one of his crew. And that bond was changing everything. The captain stood at the window of the bridge, arms crossed, behind him. Dr. Hensley placed the final report on the console. Mason's vitals are now linked to hers, he said. When she's calm, he's calm. When she's stressed, so is he. Elias didn't respond at first. She's affecting the mission. The crew, and now him, Hensley continued. If this goes any deeper, we won't be able to pull them apart safely. Elias sighed deeply, then gave the order, separate them. He said, gently but firmly. He hoped it wouldn't. Come to force, Mason didn't agree. You can't just tear her away like she's dangerous. He said, voice sharp. She's trying to adapt. She saved us. She's not a threat. But the captain shook his head. She's not the threat, son. The bond is. They waited until Rayla was resting. 2 guards entered the medbay. With soft steps, she didn't move until they touched her shoulder. Then her eyes snapped open, glowing, fierce, ancient. She didn't speak. She didn't scream. She simply stepped back and let them cuff her wrists again when Mason heard. He rushed to the brig. He wasn't allowed in, but she saw him through the barrier. Why? She asked, her voice low and trembling. I didn't do harm. Mason placed his hand on the glass. I didn't want this, he said. I'm trying to fix it. She stepped closer, only inches between them. Don't fix what is not broken, she whispered. That night, strange things began happening on the ship. Lights flickered, doors locked at random, internal sensors malfunctioned. At first, they blamed the systems, but then the AI spoke. Foreign code detected in the command network, the AI said. It matches the alien presence Rayla had. Never left her cell, but something, or someone, was reaching out. Not with weapons, not with violence, but with instinct. On day 2 of separation, Mason collapsed during patrol. His pulse dropped. His skin turned cold. Medical scans showed. No illness, no damage. Just a sudden drop in neural activity. Dr. Hensley ran tests again and again. I think he's crashing, he said. Emotionally, mentally, maybe even biologically. The bond wasn't just affecting her. Rayla sat alone in her cell, her posture calm, but her eyes were wet, her breathing shallow. The lights in her cell dimmed as she spoke quietly to herself. The call was answered, she said. But now it echoes alone. Elias stood outside the cell, watching her. He had seen hardened warriors, broken prisoners, even dangerous aliens, but he had never seen sorrow like this. Not rage, not fear. Sorrow so quiet it felt like space itself. He made a choice, not as a captain, but as a man. He ordered her release. The moment her cuffs dropped, she didn't run. She walked slowly, silently down the hall to the medbay. There, Mason lay unconscious. Hooked to machines, she entered. Without a word. Placed her hand on his chest. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then Mason's heart monitor beeped. Once, then again. Faster, stronger. His eyes opened. And the first thing he saw was her. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She only said one word, stay. He nodded weakly. I'm not going anywhere. From that moment, the crew stopped treating their bond as a problem. It wasn't military protocol. It wasn't science. It wasn't logic. It was something older. Connection, loyalty, survival. And in the eyes of a forgotten alien princess, it was also love. Rayla never returned to the medbay. She moved into Mason's quarters, not as a guest, but as his choice. She decorated it with strange lights, symbols, and patterns from her culture. And for the first time since her rescue, she slept without fear. The crew still didn't understand her completely, but they didn't need to. Because every time Rayla walked by Mason's side, every time their fingers brushed, or their eyes met across the room, one thing was clear. Their bond wasn't weakness, it was power. The stars shifted as the ship neared the Kavar Dominion. No one spoke much on the bridge. The crew had seen enough of Rayla's power to respect her. But now they were flying straight into the territory of her people. the ones who had once chained her. Captain Elias stood by the central display, watching as the alien planet grew larger on screen. It shimmered like dark glass, wrapped in purple clouds and golden rings. There was no welcome signal, only silence, until a voice, sharp and cold, cut through the coms. "You carry the first daughter," the voice said. "You will land." There were no questions, no greetings, just a command. Mason stood beside Rayla in the docking bay. She was calm, but her fingers were tight around the folds of her robe. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. She didn't answer right away. Then she looked up at him and said, "They will not want me." He touched her hand gently. "Then I'll want you enough for all of them." The landing was smooth, but the welcome was not as. They stepped out. A group of tall figures in silver armor stood waiting. Their faces were covered, their postures straight. They did not bow, did not speak to Rayla. They only turned and began walking. Expecting her to follow, Ryla's back straightened. But her pace slowed as they approached a black archway. Beyond it stood a massive hall carved from glowing crystal. At the center, a throne, and upon it, an older female with eyes like frozen suns. "Rayla of Kavar," the woman said, her voice like thunder in quiet air. "You were meant to be silent. You were meant to hunger without voice. You disobeyed." "I lived," Rayla replied, her voice steady. "I chose." The room gasped softly, not from her defiance, but from the presence beside her, a human, not kneeling, not silent, but standing tall with her. "Who is this creature?" the elder asked. "Corporal Mason," Elias said firmly from behind. "He saved her life. He bonded with her." "Impossible," one of the armored figures growled. "A Kavar royal cannot bond with a lesser being." "I did not bond to lesser," Rayla said sharply. "I bonded to truth." The elder stood, her robes flowing like smoke. "You speak of choice as if it belongs to you," she said. "Then prove it." Two guards stepped forward and pointed to Mason. "He will face the trial of need," the elder declared. "If his connection is real, he will survive the memory storm. If it is not, he will vanish like dust." "No," Rayla said instantly, stepping in front of Mason. But he touched her shoulder gently. "I'll do it," he said. "For you." They led Mason into a chamber filled with glowing orbs. Each orb held fragments of Kavar memory, pain, joy, death, rebirth, silence, longing. The moment he stepped inside, the door closed. He fell, not through space, but through emotion. He saw flashes of Ryla's childhood, her silence, her isolation, her hunger. He saw her kneeling before elders, begging for warmth and being denied. He saw her scream without sound, cry without tears, and through it all, he felt her loneliness. Sharp, endless, and deep as space. His mind throbbed. His chest tightened. He almost broke, almost gave in to the weight of it. But then he saw one final memory, the moment she first saw him on the medbay floor. Her eyes had lit up, her body had relaxed, and he realized what he was to her. Not a soldier, not a savior, but peace. He stood up inside the storm and shouted, "I'm not leaving. I'm not a ghost. I'm the answer she was denied." The lights around him dimmed, then vanished. The chamber door opened, and Mason stepped out, alive. Shaking, but whole, Rayla rushed to him, her hands on his face. "You returned," she whispered. "I never left," he said. The hall was silent. Even the elder looked shaken. She stepped down from the throne and studied Mason closely. "The bond is true," she said at last. "By our law, that cannot be undone." Some of the guards hissed in protest, but they did not move. Tradition had spoken, and it had been broken. By truth, that night, Rayla stood by the edge of the crystal. "City with Mason beside her, you faced the storm," she said. "And I'd face it again," he replied. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then maybe," she whispered, "I can finally be something more than hungry." The city of crystal slept beneath the stars. Its towers shimmered like frozen rivers, glowing softly under the twin moons. But deep inside the palace, one room stayed dark, It was not a prison, not a throne, not a place for judgment. It was Rayla's chamber, and for the first time since her return. She opened the door to Mason. He stepped inside slowly, his boots quiet on the glass floor. The walls were covered in patterns that pulsed like veins, symbols from her childhood, carvings of her house, drawings of creatures Mason couldn't name. In the center of the room stood Rayla, barefoot, silent, hands behind her back. "I want you to see," she said gently. "See what?" Mason asked. "The truth." She stepped aside and revealed a tall pod resting against the far wall. It was metallic, wrapped in glowing vines, pulsing with faint life. Mason moved closer and peered through the transparent shell. Inside was a small child, asleep, or maybe dreaming. It looked like Rayla but smaller, thinner, marked with silver lines across its cheeks. He froze. "Is that ... a clone?" he asked, unsure. Rayla shook her head. "No," she whispered. "That is my sister." Mason turned to her, confusion in his eyes. "I thought you were the only heir." "I was," she said softly, "until the day they created her. To replace me." She walked toward the pod and placed her hand against the shell. "They called me unstable," she said, "emotional, hungry, too weak to lead. So they made her, without hunger, without feeling, a perfect heir. They told me she died during testing," Rayla continued, her voice breaking. "But I found her, hidden in the old palace records. She lives but not yet." Mason stepped beside her, trying to understand. "You kept this secret from everyone," he said. She nodded slowly. "If they knew I hid her, they would erase us both." She turned to face him fully, her golden eyes filled with something deeper than sadness. "I was never just trying to survive," she said. "I was protecting her. Every choice, every bond, every risk. It was so she could wake one day in a galaxy where love isn't punished." Mason stared at the sleeping girl, and suddenly everything made sense. Rayla's defiance, her silence, her storm, her bond. None of it had been selfish. She had been holding the weight of two lives while everyone believed she was broken. "You should have told me," he said quietly. "I didn't know if you'd stay," she whispered. Mason took her hand and held it tightly. "I would have stayed anyway." There was a knock at the chamber door. Captain Elias entered, his face unreadable. "I saw the readings," he said. "Something's alive in here." Rayla didn't speak, didn't deny. She simply stepped aside so the captain could see. After a long pause, Elias exhaled deeply. "We're going to have problems," he said. "The Dominion doesn't allow biological backups, especially royal ones. But I've broken enough rules to know some are worth breaking." He looked at Mason, then Rayla. "What do you want to do?" Rayla didn't hesitate. "I want to take her with us," she said. "Far from here. Far from chains, from titles, from fear. I want to live, not rule." The captain nodded slowly. "Then we'll do it quietly," he said. "I'll prepare the ship." That night, Rayla stood by the window with Mason beside her again. "I carried her through war, silence, and shame," she said. "She is everything they hated about me, and everything they feared. And now?" Mason asked. "Now she'd be free," Rayla said, "because I chose what they never did. I chose love." Mason kissed her forehead gently. "And I chose you, behind them." The small pod pulsed gently in the shadows, not just with life, but with hope. The ship lifted off from the Crystal City in silence. No alarm sounded. No guards chased after them. Rayla had left behind her throne, her crown, her chains. All that remained now was a future she chose herself. Mason stood at the bridge window. As the stars opened up around them, beside him, Rayla cradled the pod that held her sister, her secret, her burden, now her gift. The crew said nothing as they watched her walk past. No one called her princess, not anymore. They simply nodded. Not in fear, but in respect. Captain Elias turned to Mason after launch. "You sure about this?" he asked. Mason didn't look away from the stars. "I've never been more sure." They set course for neutral space, a place far from governments and thrones. A place where names didn't carry bloodlines, just meaning, a place to start. Over inside her new quarters, Ryla opened a metal case and placed a strange stone inside. It pulsed once, then cracked open like an egg. Inside were old fragments, pieces of her people's ancient codes, traditions rewritten by hand. She looked at them and whispered, "No more hunger by silence, no more loyalty by fear, no more royalty by force." Mason entered quietly, placing a warm drink by her side. "You building something?" he asked. She nodded. "A new kind of Kavar." He smiled and sat beside her. "Not queens and crowns," she said, "but hearts and hands." "No rule," she added, "just choice." As days passed, the crew began to change too. They no longer tiptoed around her. She laughed now, not the soft, careful laugh of before, but loud, clear, and real. She joined meals, sparred in training, even lost a bet with Aaron and wore a human jacket for a day. She was no longer royalty. She was family. Her sister's pod remained protected in the medbay. Dr. Hensley checked on it every morning. "She's developing," he said. "Stronger, healthier. Ryla's presence helps." Mason often stood at the glass, watching the small girl grow inch by inch. "Will she remember any of this?" he asked one day. "No," Ryla said, stepping beside him. "But she'll feel it." "Feel what?" "That she was born into love, not control." The ship docked one day at a small outpost, a place full of mixed species. Traitors, runaways, dreamers. There Ryla gave a speech to a curious crowd, not about war or rule or legacy, but about freedom. "We are not our bloodlines," she said, her voice calm but powerful. "We are not what they fear. We are what we choose. And I choose to begin again." The speech spread across channels, whispered among outcasts. The story of a princess who left everything behind for one human and one sleeping child. She became more than a leader. She became a signal, a beacon for those who were born to obey, but dared to feel. Later that night, Mason walked into their quarters. Ryla was curled on the floor with a soft light above her, writing in a new book, a human one. She looked up and smiled. "You're late," she teased. "You're radiant," he replied, grinning. She tilted her head, amused. "Is that a human phrase or your own invention?" "Both," he said, sitting beside her. They didn't speak for a while, just sat together in the glow of the soft light, while the ship hummed toward nowhere and everywhere. And in that moment, she was not a fallen heir, not a captive, not a weapon. She was a sister, a builder, a partner. She was no longer defined by what she'd lost. She was defined by what she chose and who she loved. A new kind of royalty, born not from blood, but from bond, not by command, but by courage. This time, she was not alone.